questions. We have no public input, we have no local board input, we have no extraordinary items. Boom. So we now go to the first item on the agenda, which is the operational readiness work for CRL. So I believe Mark and Jane, and I think Stacey was in Wellington yesterday, flying in, which wasn't a pleasant experience by all accounts. But welcome, and I'll hand over to you.
Good morning, councillors, and thank you. This is an update on the operational readiness for CRL. It links in nicely to the following presentation from QRL on the network-wide readiness, which AT is supporting as well. We've got a bit of an update of how this all links together, because I'm conscious we haven't presented to the committee for a while on operational readiness, and then jump into some of the specific work streams to give you an idea of how on track we are. So we're looking obviously to open CRL in 2026. We are just about to enter, or we have entered into what is arguably the most complex and challenging phase of any rail project, which is the system integration and testing and commissioning. Risk and timing is still uncertain around that particular phase, and we're also integrating with CRL Limited and Link Alliance on testing and commissioning of the full network-wide timetable as well, and making sure we get access slots onto the network to be able to achieve that. Therefore, we will be progressively narrowing the launch window over the next 6 months or so as we get more certainty around that testing and commissioning phase. So what we'd like to go through today is a quick overview about the one client approach, the integrated approach we are taking to operational readiness, and like I say, actual updates on specific work streams, and then how the bus network and the wider PT network is planned to integrate into day one as well. I'd like to hand over to Jane, who will run through the initial slides on the one client approach.
Good morning, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jane Small, and I'm a bit closer. Is that working? For those of you who don't know me, I'm the relatively new GM for rail infrastructure at Auckland Transport, but I have been at Auckland Transport for the last 7 or 8 years. So just talking through the one client partnership here, it's what we call a virtual alliance that's been set up to make sure that there's one voice speaking to the Link Alliance, and that's a combination of KiwiRail, obviously around the as the rail infrastructure owner, and the operator of the Passenger Services, AT, and CRL. It's worked very successfully, and it is continuing to provide, I think, a more efficient way of issuing instructions and making sure that we are ready for day one. This slide is really just to indicate the number of work streams to get the CRL, the City Rail Link, ready for day one. So it's giving you an indication of the types of work that needs to occur, that it's not just around the rail network. Mark's going to talk in more detail around each of these work streams. Obviously there's the construction, the testing and commissioning is a significant part of the work, and it's how all of that, I guess the trains, the rail, all of those systems speak to each other to ensure that it's ready for day one. And what's particularly important from our perspective at Auckland Transport is around the broader public transport readiness. So the bus network, ensuring that that is ready and is linked in, and some of the minor changes that need to be made to that, and our front of house customer that Auckland One Rail is responsible for is ready and geared up for day one. And also just in terms of ensuring from a customer information perspective that customers are familiar on day one with the new timetable, the new routes, and all of that forms part of the integrated timetable and journey planner.
Thanks, Jane. This slide takes it to the next level of integration. So there's a number of layers which Jane's talked about, but they're all working in parallel. So there's obviously the getting the CRL itself ready. Then there's the broader rail network ready, which is the enabler of the CRL, but most importantly, the broader timetable for the whole rail network. That includes the timetable development, fleet and staffing. It also includes, which you'll hear an update on next from QRL on the rail network rebuild. And also the integration into the wider public transport network, the integration of the bus services and the precincts. And that all leads to ultimately the launch countdown, which are the last elements to get right, I suppose, which is the staff rosters, notification of those rosters to staff, announcement to the public and marketing, launch events, and actually building the momentum through customer information and how do you use the network, and building that understanding of the difference that CRL will actually make to the whole public transport system in Auckland. Building confidence. This, as we approach the last couple of phases of CRL, it's all about testing and building the confidence at the moment, the train systems and the station systems, that's the phase we're in at the moment. Then it's moving into an integrated test approach between those train systems and station systems into an integrated system testing and commissioning of CRL. That then leads into the ability for AT and AOR and QRL to test the wider network and the wider timetable. I'll talk about that a little bit more later, but it is a whole of rail network change. Once we've got confidence around that timetable and the wider network performance, that's when we will be able to announce the actual opening date with yourselves, but also announce rosters with staff, which is effectively when the go date goes live. So jumping into a couple of the actual key work streams and where we're at in terms of operational readiness. So timetable development. There's a lot of work, as you'd expect, underway at the moment. The timetable specification has been completed. It was issued to QRL officially towards the end of last year. And QRL are now undertaking performance modelling of that timetable, which is due to be reported back this month. At the moment, the results appear positive, but there is a little bit more work to go. That puts into place a whole new timetable and service structure across rail of those three lines, east-west, South City and Onehunga West. At the moment, we are, in parallel to that, starting to develop the staff rosters and train allocation plans, but that will be completed as part of the following steps to the timetable when the performance model is confirmed. And one of the aspects that QRL and AOR and ourselves will be working through is how does the passenger timetable work effectively on a multi-operator network. So you've obviously on our network also got freight and interregional services. Those all need to link together into one single integrated operation. Just a quick update on the train fleet and where we're at on that project. It's moving pretty quickly. We are into acceptance phase of the additional 23 trains that have been added to the fleet to get the fleet up to 95. Since this presentation was circulated, we've actually improved the situation. So at the moment now we've got 9 new trains in service, 3 in testing, 11 in manufacturing, including 1 in transit. We are receiving a new train roughly every couple of weeks or so into Auckland. The expansion of the fleet will also allow a full 6-car operation on the peak of the network when CRL opens. And that, along with the modification program, is all on track to complete prior to CRL day 1. The modification program includes things such as improved door sensors for drag detection and some modifications which are required to meet CRL operating standards. A quick update on staffing and recruitment. At the moment, there's approximately 160 train and station frontline staffing increases that we need to operate CRL day 1. They're fully budgeted, they're fully approved, and we're in a phased approach to recruitment. So, for example, train drivers have pretty much all been recruited for day one and undergoing what from scratch is a one-year training programme. Other areas such as maintenance and fully recruited management teams and train the trainer and testing commissioning staff, yet to start the full day one recruitment because we do want to phase it to the actual opening to manage costs effectively. Okay. No. Can you control it from there?
Here we go. Perhaps this is ominous. I have the pleasure of looking after the precincts in PT tie-in. So just giving you a bit of an update on where we're at with each of them. I'll start with Karangahape because there has been some discussion around that. We have worked closely with the stakeholders in the area and now aligned on the preferred options for Cross Street and for East Street, where there were some concerns that were raised. And we'll be taking those preferred options back to the local board towards the end of June. And we have reached really what I think a position where the stakeholders are largely aligned on the outcomes for that precinct, particularly looking at balancing pedestrians, vehicles and cycling in the area. So in Te Waihoratu, the Wellesley Street bus improvements are proceeding and on track. There has been agreement reached around the works that are occurring in Merrill Drive, and we're just working towards finalising that with the developer who's delivering the oversight development. There has been some discussion around the water care works that were planned within that area, and it seems that we are now in a position where the water care works will be delayed for a period of time post CRL opening, but that's still just being negotiated at this point in time. With Mangawhau, there is work being done. There's a working group, a cross-council working group that has been set up to move forward very swiftly with the work around that area, particularly around the day one activation. There has been work done by Eki Panuku in the past, and Auckland Transport has now picked that up, and we'll be looking at that. There is some work also being done around the movement within that precinct, particularly around buses and vehicular movement through the precinct. So there is a work that our council and AT are doing together to look at some of the feedback that has been received recently around the way in which that precinct has been set up and the movement through it. And we would look to come back to council probably towards, I would say, towards the end of June around the outcomes of that work. Just in terms of communication and engagement, obviously it's a massive task to make sure that everyone is ready, everyone knows about, and everyone is excited about the opening of CRL. So there's joint communications between KiwiRail and ourselves, and we're taking what's called a layered approach. So building knowledge, just starting with getting people to understand the new timetable, to work out what the impact will be for their journey, to understand how they'll move through the precincts, and also to ensure that that there is an excitement and around the opening, and that patronage is people are wanting to use it, will use it, and know how to use it. There's also work around partners and stakeholders, with our partners and stakeholders, to ensure that they are all aligned and understand how it will work on day one. And of course, there are events and various things that are being put in place to celebrate the opening, which is a pretty exciting thing for the city.
Okay, we've just got a couple of slides to give a bit of a summary on the bus integration for day one of CRL. So obviously we're looking to have an integrated approach to the whole network. Since the bus network was delivered, the new bus network was delivered in between 2016 and 2019 as an integrated multimodal approach. We have continued to ensure that every rail station has bus services connecting to allow people to get to and from the rail network, but also obviously to expand that accessibility. At the moment, obviously, the train network can only service 4 corridors across Auckland, and the bus network, particularly with frequent services, is continuing to expand and offers access around 20 plus corridors. So it's really important that we integrate the 2 modes. Even after CRL opens, 60% of public transport users will access the city centre by bus. This gives a little bit of a visual presentation of the accessibility to Britomart with only rail, but then when we actually put in place the integrated connections with the bus services as well. Like I say, all train stations have connecting bus services, and this is particularly important on the outside of the city centre and on the periphery of the network. With regards to terminating bus services at stations in the city centre, we are reducing the number of services that are accessing the city centre, but not all of them, because a number of the majority of bus users will actually be progressing beyond just a connection to a station in the city centre to get to their terminating point. And we don't particularly want to disadvantage people by adding to their trip length or to increase transfers where they've only got 1 or 2 bus stops remaining on their trip. Having said that, that is an overview of the programme of change across the bus network between now and CRL opening. It builds on the change that has happened already. And for example, bus services that are terminating in the city centre will reduce by around 20% when CRL opens from the historic network. I think that's the end of our presentation, but happy to take questions, Chair.
Thank you, Mark and Jane. Someone just like to move that the registry? Thank you, Chris. Seconder. Thank you, Greg. Okay, so open it up for questions.
I have
Christine.
Mark, and lovely to meet you. Can you just take us back a moment or two, just in a governance sense, so that we can understand how we've got to this particular point? And I welcome the information you've given us today as we look forward. So we had CRL Limited, we had the co-sponsors. So if I think back, we had Phil Goffin, we had Bill Cashmore and the government ministers of the day. And so in terms of the actual brief for design and everything and accountability around that, where has that body of work largely been done?
Well, so the structure as we've described in this pack here is obviously City Rail Link Limited is the SPV which has been tasked with design and build of the CRL assets. And that's overseen from a governance point of view by the joint sponsors, by Council and MOT Treasury. And they meet on a regular basis to oversee the performance and the delivery of CRL Limited in delivery of the tunnels and the 3 station assets. The one client concept is an informal bringing all the different client agencies together to support CRL Limited in effectively making sure the asset is ready, it's fit for purpose, it meets the design requirements, it meets the operational requirements, and AT's ready, KeyRail's ready, and our suppliers such as Auckland One Rail and Downer from a maintenance point of view to take the asset on, if you like, and operate the services from day one. I'm not sure whether that answers the question, but...
So what I'm really trying to understand is how this departure now with the work that you're undertaking within AT, is this a departure from where we've been, or is this a progression?
No, it's a progression. It was always intended to operate like this under the various contractual arrangements between council, sponsors, CRL Limited, and we are a partner within supporting the Link Alliance and CRL Limited under various agreements.
So, very good to see the work, especially around issues of connectivity, and I'm particularly interested in the stations. Has there been any change in terms of the brief that you've got to ensure, or is this a continuation of the policy that was developed, taking into account all the co-sponsors and the CRL Limited? Where have the changes taken place that we're seeing today?
I might just pass that over to Barry.
Yes, perhaps I might be able to address some of this, Councillor Fletcher. Do my best on that. What happens is that City Rail Link Limited are essentially responsible for delivering a project, completion of the works. That is their responsibility. Then there's a whole lot of other things that need to be in place for this to work really well, and the things that Jane and Mark have just outlined around the wider network, around communications with the community and users and so on and so forth. What happens is that we have a transition from completion of the project through to actual operations of the network. That's what the One Client Alliance was set up for, to ensure that that's a smooth transition. It's actually going pretty well. And the parties, my observation, I'm the council sponsors rep and actually the sponsors rep for the project formally, my observation is that that transition is working well with the One Client Alliance operating quite effectively, with very good interaction between Auckland Transport, Kiwi Rail, who are here as well, Auckland One Rail, City Rail Link Limited, Link Alliance. It is going pretty well to get that transition.
Barry, I appreciate that, and I don't want to monopolise question time, but I'd reserve my right, Chair, to come back. But I'm just trying to have clear that there's been a long process leading up to this with various parties, but ultimately the public are interested in the operational functionality of the CRL. They're not interested in all the, but we do need to have the assurance that in a governance structure there will be accountability and clarity around that on day one.
Thank you. Mayor Brown.
Okay, I just want to talk about a couple of things. There is a lot of people involved, and Barry, you're doing a good job to get on top of it at the moment. You raised the comms and engagement thing. Who's in charge of that? Because there's so many people here, and there's so many layers of, there's layers about announcements for the public who catch the buses and trains. But there's also an overall layer at the very top. And if it all goes wrong, I am a joint sponsor along with the Minister. And despite the fact that there's been thousands of people below me, I will get blamed for this. I want to know exactly, anything that's big has to come at least past me. And so I will share it with Mr. Bishop. Is that all right? Okay. Next thing is, I have meddled in this recently, and I have been very disappointed at what was going on at Mangawhau. And Barry is now working in a small group, which you outlined, and you did mention Iki Panuke, but there's no way they're going to have anything to do with this, because they've had a lot to do with what produced a major railway station where you couldn't get to by car. You had to walk in the rain. You couldn't get an ambulance there, or a fire engine, or a bus. And it's centred between two major roads of New North Road and Mount Eden Road, and with very little thought in the Sunday It was easy to work out how all the buses can go past that railway station without having to turn around at all. So I want to make absolutely sure that is what's going to happen. We are going to have a drive-through. Ruru Lane will go right through. Now, I don't know how or who came up with what we've got there, but as a way to minimise value and minimise the number of people that catch on a train, it would be hard to do better than what we've got. So how do we find out who did that? And is the new group going to be able to sort this out so that people do catch the blooming train? Barry, we've put a lot of weight on Barry's shoulders here all of a sudden, and I've shoveled it onto it. But there's been a lot of well-paid people fiddling around with this, and it was hard to believe they've come up with what they came up with. So is there any way we can have some finding out? I believe other members in AT have had a look around, but no one seems to have their hand up to say, I did this. Can you answer that?
I can't answer that today because I have only recently become involved, but we are very aware, Mayor Brown, of your feedback, and we're working very closely with Auckland Council around looking at what the options are. My understanding is that there has been a lot of work that has gone into this. The precinct has been developed through CRL. However, we are now looking at it from a movement and what were the original assumptions. So we're doing that work at the moment as of yesterday, and then looking at what the future may look like in terms of the impact of movement through the precinct on the broader network, including Mount Eden Road and New North Road, but taking into account the feedback that you have given around drop-off and pick-up and bus movements. I understand that there has been a presentation to you as well around the reasoning behind the bus movements in and around the precinct, but what we are doing is looking at it very swiftly within AT and together with Auckland Council, and as I said, we will be coming back with some options and looking at those options towards the end of June. But in terms of who was responsible, I can't answer that, I'm sorry, and
Okay, well, I only asked that.
And not what the details will be going forward because we're looking at it at the moment.
I only asked that because we've only just started lifting the stones and the slaters are running everywhere, and there's plenty of other things which will come up later on. I mean, there's the small matter of the world's most expensive tree base.
Risky as it is, have you got any more questions, Mayor?
No, I have questions here. My main question is, because we had 100 bus changes you've just announced there, but none of those actually went past the railway station. Now we're going to go past the railway station. Will these changes be implemented?
In terms of the 100 or so changes to the bus network that I talked about there, they will, and they are actually all phased into various bus procurements that are being completed over the next 6 months and included in new contracts, so yes.
So that everyone's quite happy to follow through what Barry is leading with my help. Is that true?
Sorry, could you repeat?
So everybody in your teams is quite happy to follow through with the stuff which Barry is now leading with my help.
We're absolutely part of Barry's team and the wider council group that's leading on this, yes.
Very good. Thank you.
Buses come past. What we're looking at, we've established 4 work streams to resolve or make sure we've got the right solutions put in place. The work streams are, first one is around the oversight development and how that's been taken to the market. The second one is focused on transportation, not just the buses that could go past the station itself, but also drop off, plus the wider network, plus wayfinding around the station and ensuring the site, we're talking here about Mangawhau, is in the best position for day one. The next work stream, the third work stream, is around communications and engagement with the wider community, plus the local businesses and so on and so forth, and with yourselves. And then we have, of course, the actual delivery of the work, which is primarily through City Rail Link Limited. Those are working well together.
Is then, That sounds good, but every time we have multiplicities of work streams, we have completely, no one's responsible and they all go off in different directions. And so ATF perfected the art of multiple work streams, but when this opens, people are going to look at CRL and not know any of that stuff. They just want to make sure it all works. So can we make sure the 4 work streams know each other, at least? Thank you.
Thank
May
you.
may I take just a brief supplementary to that? So the Mayor's asked perhaps the questions one way, following on from what you've said in terms of what Jane and you both said, is there's been no major change in policy, which was what I was trying to establish. But what I'm interested in, on day one at Mangawhau, if you want to get an Uber to Mangawhau Station, or if you want to get a bus to Mangawhau Station, there will be connectivity in its most simple form.
Yes, if you want to get an Uber, there is a drop-off outside the station, just to the side. Yeah. Well, the circulation plans do show that that's where you will be able to get an Uber. From a bus perspective, that has been looked at the moment in terms of the buses are stopping on Mount Eden and New North Road at present.
So that would suggest there has been a change then in the brief, because that was not apparent very recently.
Are you talking about the Uber drop-off, or are you talking about the buses?
I'm talking about people with disabilities, people who are coming on Ubers, people in terms of the public expectation, given the investment in the station, the usability of it.
There is a circulation plan that has been prepared which enables vehicular traffic for people with mobility issues and for Ubers to access outside the station. It is just if you look at the Mangawhau station, the drop-off is in the lane that goes directly forward to it, the circulation of movement, and there is a particular access that has been designed for people with mobility issues.
Well, I welcome the intervention by the co-sponsor in this situation, and I have confidence in Barry, but it does strike me, in terms of the answer to the original question, that this is a change in the policy from what was presented to us not so very long ago.
Okay, thank you. And Barry's got a big job sweeping all the ball bearings into one pile. So, Greg.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and helpful update, so thank you very much. It's kind of a bit mind-boggling, really, so all the best with that journey through. I hope it goes well, and that kind of relates into my question about potential risks that are sitting there that, I don't know, the senior management team or the one client group might, be keeping them up at night. Is there any visibility you'd like to give us around that? My second question would be just curious about where the workshops are, where these trains are being fitted out and where they get maintained. I can probably Google it, but you might be able to tell me more quickly. Okay, thanks.
In terms of your question around key risks, obviously there is a whole risk approach, management approach within Link Alliance and CRL Limited in terms of delivering the assets and across the operational readiness streams that we're managing. I mentioned at the start one of the key risks at the moment, which still exists, which is the complex and challenging nature of the testing and commissioning phase, which we are just about to enter into. We're monitoring risks across all the different enablers, including delivery of trains, preparation of our suppliers, etc., etc. So I can assure you that we are considering all those risks. In terms of your second question, where's the maintenance?
Yeah, I might want to come and have a visit one day, Mark, where these things are getting fitted out and maintained.
We can organise through Barry and the Chair a visit to the Wirrie depot, where we've only got one depot for the EMU maintenance, and we can organise a visit for that.
Cool. And just on that, Barry's going to circulate something after the meeting. There are a number of things going on in and around the place, and that's an interesting thing. So he's going to circulate something, or staff will circulate something about seeing what interest there is amongst councillors to go on a couple of little visits to various various places and things that we're donkey deep in at the moment to have a look at. So you can go and have a look at Wiri, which is a very interesting place. Kieran.
Yeah, my question is just around the timeframes again. I know that you've said it's going to be next year sometime, but I mean, can we say that it would be before June or July? And just to give us an indication of that, first of all.
As I said at the start, we are looking to narrow the window of public launch as we progress through the current testing and commissioning phase, which is the most challenging, is the most risky. So at the moment, no, I can't, because we want more certainty around that date or around the windows when we do make an announcement.
Okay. The second question that I had was just around the trialling that you have been doing, because I know I saw the update on the sandbags, and but you have had people actually go through now on the trains?
We've had our engineers and qualified test crew who are meant to be there and monitoring the testing of the trains when they go through the trains, through the tunnels. But no, it hasn't been opened up, obviously, to public or any other passengers.
Thank you. That was just going to be my final comment of when we can come through for a test run.
Okay, Richard.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you for the information. Just on Karangahape Road Station neighbourhood, and I know you've said that isn't public yet, but I guess, are we moving more towards the original design that was approved by the TCC? Like, it seems wild that Auckland Transport Board approved a design and then we changed it all 3 months later.
So yes, we are. I guess in terms of meeting the city centre master plan and access for everyone, we have held a workshop around that with council and the wider some wider stakeholders to take a matrix approach, if you like, to that to ensure that it does. So I think that when those outcomes are taken back to the local board, that people will be consider that they do meet those objectives, particularly around the pedestrianisation that is really key for people accessing the station. But as you know, there are a number of needs to balance in that area, and so balancing all of those and the feedback that we've received in the recent months or recent weeks has been taken into account.
I guess maybe it's a question for Dean later, but I saw all the Gloimid, staff correspondence back and forth, and I guess on this, maybe to the Mayor's question too, that it is, how does it happen when staff were clearly giving feedback, do not revisit this, it has been approved, etc., that it suddenly got all changed?
I think that we have accepted that we didn't get that right in terms of where it headed, and we have said that. We've now taken on board all of the stakeholder and the changes that were made to Cross Street were in response to direct feedback from business owners and from stakeholders in the area. However, there is a broader aspect that needs to be considered, and that's now been taken into account, and also the feedback that we have received recently. And we have looked to balance all of those needs and all of those interests in that precinct, and to achieve a quality outcome that meets access for everyone. And we consider now that that's where we have got to.
Okay, thank you. The questions on Mangafo, and as far as I can remember, there was always definitely Uber access, but the buses, and I know Stacey's not here, but you're not planning to bring all those frequent buses through past the station, are you? Because that
is not the current plan.
There could be some feeder buses into there potentially.
The feeder bus options are being considered as part of this work that we're doing together with that Barry is leading. But at present, so we're going to consider all options, but at present the network has been designed for those frequent bus services to run and stop on Mount Eden Road and New North Road. But we're considering what that might look like in terms of some more limited bus services as part of that work.
Yeah, just on that, I've been looking at the stats, and I think like the 22s and the 24s, sort of 75% of those people don't get on and off on the rail network. So when you say there'll be a reduction of those frequent services, are we making sure that all those university
Sorry,
buses...
I'm not suggesting that there will be a change in those frequent services. And as I say, I can't really comment further on the work that's been done. From a network perspective and with the planning that has been done, the intention was that those bus services would continue. There's some tweaks that would be made to them, but it was not anticipated that they would go and stop at the station.
No,
Yeah.
I was more meaning because the map that you put up there says removal of peak bus capacity, but I think about 3/4 of those people don't actually, they get off at like the universities, Eden Terrace, places that aren't on the...
I'll hand over to Mark because he is much more qualified to answer those questions than I am.
The comment around reducing buses coming into the city centre by 20% is purely where there is duplication with rail. Where there's different markets on the frequent buses, no, that's not the intention at all. It's to keep the frequencies going on those frequent services on the 20 plus corridors, correct? Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Okay, Morris.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Most of what I want to do today, I'll have to wait till we get to the debate part of it, so I don't break the rules that Alf sets, but I will ask some questions. If you're doing a big multi-portfolio project like this and the number of entities involved just keeps growing, there are some I keep hearing daily that I've never even heard of before, there has to always be a lead agency. So when CRL was originally conferred and the government and the council decided to go ahead with it, who was made the lead agency to determine, to broker outcomes when there was disputes or disagreements or whatever?
So City Rail Link Limited were established as that lead agency. They're responsible for the delivery of the project. CRLL were also the agency who established a one-client alliance, bringing the other parties on board to ensure that we had a good transition through to operational readiness. City Rail Link Limited remain as that agency to deliver the project.
Right. So when I first asked at AT who was responsible, let's pick Mangawhau as an example. There are plenty of others I'd like to ask about. I was told that Eki Panuku had been the main agency in deciding layouts, buildings, what was going to be residential and so on. Is that correct, that Eki Panuku was the main determinant of what went on at that site?
2 years ago, Council appointed Eki Panuku as the lead agency for the oversight development at Mangawhau.
Right. So then yesterday I spoke to David Rankin for quite some time and asked him about the changes that have occurred from the original. And his answer to me was that in 2019, CRLL asked for some significant changes to the original plan in 2019, and those changes were accommodated. Is that right?
In 2019, as I recall, CRLL were responsible for the land sales transactions at the end of the project. That changed in 2 years ago with the appointment of Eki Panuku as the lead agency for that process.
Because Barry, my next problem is that we got to meet on Tuesday with the CRLL board, and I asked them how many of you were around in 2019, and only one of them was. And I asked them that question, was it you that made a submission wanting dramatic change to the original layout and design? And their answer was, no, we didn't. No, we did not ask for changes. So more and more do I get the confusion arising where different agencies within this big pyramid are giving it different answers about different things. And I was always taught as a minister when there were multiple AGs involved, you had to have one that was responsible for the whole shooting box, or else everyone could blame somebody else in the matrix and no one would ever be held accountable. So I'm still struggling with who was in charge and signed off on all the decisions down through the pyramid.
Look, I would get my dates wrong if I went backwards. However, it seems the responsibility is now mine for here on to get this
I'm
resolved.
more asking historically. There must have been a lead agency that took control when all of this was signed up for.
It was City Rail Link Limited up until the point where Eke Panuku were appointed as a lead agency.
So certain responsibilities that were originally granted to CRLL were taken off them and given to Eke Panuku.
Correct, for the oversight development, that's correct.
Right, and that was a formal process. I can go and look up the papers that went through here about how that transfer occurred.
Yes.
Okay, and do you know when?
My recollection, it was April or May 2 years ago, is my recollection.
And I think just hold here. I mean, we can spend a lot of time trying to find who we need to tar and feather and drag through the streets of Mount Eden. I would prefer that we look at, see how we actually move forward from here. Barry has taken hold of...
You may prefer that, but I want to know how we got to this point.
And so he can get you that information. Interrogating him here today, Morris, isn't going to achieve anything. And so what I'm saying is allow them to get that information to you and let's move forward. Let's look ahead. Barry has got the job, and it is a pretty difficult job now of trying to bring it all together so that we learn from what's gone on in the past and we have a better outcome. And so, yep, we can sit here and we can try and find someone to point the finger at, but it's not going to achieve anything today. So I'm asking that we just move on and we can get you that information, because interrogating Barry and trying to put him in a spot isn't going to achieve anything.
Well, why is it trying to find out historically how this has gone wrong, somehow trying to tar and feather and interrogate Barry? I actually have a role as a councillor, and my role is to know if we've got to a place that's a terrible place, and I think it is at this point, it's going to need a lot of mopping up. I want to know, how did that happen? And what are the lessons we can learn to make sure, because the number of agencies in here that can also, well, it wasn't us, they did it, then they said, no, it wasn't us. And I really resent you telling me that I'm just looking to tar and feather someone. I'm actually trying to find, how did we get to this point?
Okay, so let's move on, and you'll get that information, and then you can make your decision. So we'll just move on, and next up, Wayne.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Chair. So I've got a question that goes to customer information and the preparedness around the stations. In particular, it goes to, I think, what's generally termed wayfinding. I take an interest in that. I've seen how it operates in other cities, and it's incredibly synchronised, so it's very easy to find your way. How are we going around that? Have we got a fairly seamless integration of wayfinding in place? And further to that, have we tested it so that we know it works? So that, the worst case test is somebody that is entirely new to Auckland, maybe someone that doesn't speak English, and they need to find their way. Have we done some testing around that?
So there is as part of customer readiness, there is a wayfinding work stream, and that has been developed, and it will be tested as part of the whole operational readiness work stream that's occurring.
The other question I've got, it's an issue that I've raised before, and I raised it very early in the CRLL process, and that's around the economics of operation and perhaps the opportunities for revenue. For example, in cities I visited in Taiwan and Taipei, for example, their metro works with no government subsidy and no council subsidy because they have a digital offering, they have associated retail, and it was planned in advance with that in mind. So how are we going in that space? Are we identifying opportunities?
Yes.
And who is responsible for that?
Yes, we are. There is retail in the stations and digital as well. So yes.
And who is responsible for that?
Ultimately, it will be Auckland Transport when the asset transfers over.
But ultimately, who is responsible now for that?
If the question's around digital advertising and revenue income at Auckland
The
Transport,
whole rollout around that, yes.
correct. That's Auckland Transport in terms of the actual advertising itself. In terms of installation of signage and digital signs in the stations, everything, that's part of the CRLL and Link Alliance brief.
Okay.
Next one. Julie, online.
Kia ora, thank you. So I have a couple of questions, and one of them is in relation to an image I've just asked Lata to put up. Thank you. So this is from the CRL website, and I would encourage my colleagues to have a look there. There's a whole lot of maps of the streetscapes and stuff like that. This image and the map I'm looking at now, which obviously you can't see, but is there under Maungawhau streetscapes, clearly shows taxis pulling up pretty close to the station, and assumedly that would be available to Ubers as well. Is that still the case? Is this still the design?
Yes, that is currently the plan.
Okay, and that's been the plan for some time, is that correct?
As far as I understand it, yes.
Okay, thank you. And so I just wanted to check there's no change to that, because some of the earlier discussion made it sound like people weren't going to be able to get close to the station if they were being dropped off. And that's not what this image shows, and that's not what the maps show. So I wanted that confirmed. Is this closer to the station entrance than people can probably get at Waitemata Station, Britomart?
Mark and I were just discussing that. We think it probably is, but it may be similar, but I would have to take that away to answer that.
Okay. And the other question I have is in regard to the previous, sorry, I have a couple of other questions too, Chair, but I'll try and keep them brief. The other question I have around this access issue is previously the 22, the 24 on New North Road, and the 25 and 27 over on Mount Eden Road, they didn't come any closer to the station than this, did they? This is not a change, which is taking trains further away from the station in the new layout. I think the platform itself is slightly further away from the Mount Eden Road end, but therefore I guess it's slightly closer to the New North Road end. Is that still the case?
That's correct. There's been no change to the original plans in terms of where the frequent bus services go on those roads and their relative closeness to the station.
Okay, cool. I guess I would just finally on that commend to my colleagues having a look at all of that. The other thing I wondered if you might explain, please, about the community liaison group that has been operating right through this project, which meets, I think, every 2 months. I've been attending it most of the time, and that has kept the community involved. Local board, other elected members have been invited to attend. Did you want to just briefly outline what that group has done to talk about the plans for Maungawhau?
I'm afraid that I'm not actually able to speak to that directly because I've recently come into the role, but I am aware that there has been that very active group, and the plans for the precinct have been shared and developed, as far as I understand, with receiving feedback from the wider community.
Great, and I can confirm that Uptown, which is the business association in that area, has been very involved in that group too. They've had numerous tours of the site and things like that.
Yeah.
So finally, oh, sorry.
Just to follow that up, AT has been part of that group. It has been led to date by CRL Limited and Link Alliance because it's obviously part of the construction activities, but we will continue to engage.
Yeah, my observation is that while there has been a lot of interest from the community and those who attend in the construction impact, there's also right from early on, well, I mean, I've only been involved for the last 2.5 years, but there's always been an interest in what will the final shape be, what will the streetscape be. That's been a very live discussion with the community. Final question I just wanted to ask about, picking up on Councillor Walker's points about wayfinding. I think this is something where it would be really useful to do some work with, particularly the seniors and the disability advisory panels. The seniors panel did a really good workshop earlier in the term around that sort of what would a person who didn't have a smartphone and was new to the city, how would they find their way around? I don't want to go into lots of detail about it, but it was a really useful reflection on the practical reality of how people experience this stuff. So is that something that you'd be interested in picking up, is some work with those two panels to really test the stuff out on the ground?
So I am aware that we have regular forums, particularly with disability access and seniors, but certainly, yes, it is important that everyone has access and understands how to move around, in and around the transport network.
Yeah, it'd be great to make that connection for the seniors panel in particular, because they hosted that and came up with it and ran it, and it was really very impressive and challenging piece of work. So, happy to help make that connection. Thanks, Chair.
Auckland Transport also does have a public transport advisory group, which is part of our processes, and obviously they're fully embedded in this as well.
Yeah, and I encourage that. I think sometimes the Disability Advisory Panel has some different perspectives to offer, which are also really valuable, and the seniors too. So, yeah, but I'll leave it there. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Chris Darby.
Thanks, Chair. Look, I don't want to labour this point, but I do think, Chair and Barry, we do need to probably get a timeline of what decisions were made by who, because I'm hearing different versions of facts. And it's understandable, and Councillor Williamson and I had this discussion at the Auckland Transport Board just the other day, because Jane, you are working to the development plan, aren't you, that was signed off 2 years ago by the sponsors, being Auckland Council and the respective ministers. That's the plan that you're working to, the plan that was signed off to by us.
Yes, that's correct.
And that extends to access and everything else, and that's just what you're going by. So I think it's important going forward, Chair and Barry, that if there are any changes to that plan, that it needs to be decided. I think it's in this committee, your committee. It's nowhere else. It's here. It's not by any individual. And I'm messaging that back to the staff, because it is critically important that we do not divert from that plan, as there has been criticism of, say, the cross street work. Okay? So I'm just getting some assurance. Can we see, I know this is a little bit of work, but a timeline, and also the development plan that this committee, I think it was this committee in about June or July, signed off on. And there's a 26-page development plan. I think we should just cast our eyes over, Barry. I think we all probably need a little bit of a refresher course.
Yep, and I agree. And so let's get out. I agree about the clear political accountability. No more questions? Okay, thank you, team. Ask you to step back. Discussion. Angela.
Thank you. Just a quick comment, and thank you to everyone that's working on this project, all the work that's going into it. The issue we have here is politicians getting involved, and I've witnessed it, and I've been to meetings where there's been demands for change for this station, these stations, the City Rail Link, and it is not okay. We are all here to be the decision makers on what happens for the City Rail Link. It doesn't get decided in an office with a few politicians. So I support you, Andy, in getting that right as we move forward now. The decisions come back to all of us, and that all of the partners that are in this project now have the confidence that they don't need to be told what to do by a couple of politicians. We're all in this together. Let's end it together. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike.
Just a couple of comments, Mr. Chair. In regard to the preparations for the opening of the CRL, I see one aspect not really given much emphasis at all, if any, and that is the passengers, the people who are meant to use it. And we have a challenge there. As I think I warned at the very first meeting of this committee back in late 2022, Kiwi Rail and AT's preferred approach to the RNR, the formation rebuild, was get it done quick and don't worry about disrupting services, don't take an alternative approach. Well, unfortunately, the services were disrupted, the passengers were burnt off, and it hasn't been done quickly anyway. And patronage, I think, is a real challenge for us here. From the turn of the century, year 2000 to 2019, rail patronage in Auckland was built up from 2 million passenger trips per year, and with much blood, sweat and tears and a lot of money, it got up to 21 million passenger trips per year. It's now fallen back to below 14 million passenger trips per year, which is round about where it was when we electrified back in 2013 and 14. But anyway, this is the challenge, and Councillor Williamson has talked about the top-heavy, complicated management approach, and that relates to our rail services and to an extent PT in general. In rail we have AT, we have Kiwi Rail, and we have Auckland One Rail, which I understand is a Melbourne-based, Singapore Melbourne-based investment company behind it. And so there are transactional costs. Now, in addition to this complicated arrangement when it comes to responsibility, there is also the operational costs. And unfortunately, AT in particular has not been able to really manage the impost of these costs by these, not only the private sector, but also Kiwi Rail, and they've gone up 50%. So since 2019, and the response has been to come to the Auckland Council for more money, but also to put up fares. And that is self-defeating, because that's a major way of turning off customers from PT services, people who tend to be working people on lower income. And so therefore, I think we really need to give a lot of attention to when this day one arrives, how we build up. The word confidence was used. I think there's a lack of that in terms of when and how much this project will really cost, but I think we need to also build up confidence in the general public, in our rail services, and you don't do that by putting up swinging price increases every year. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Morris.
Yeah. I'm going to cover off what I think is really important here. This is a massive project, which original price tag was about 1/3 of what it's going to end up at, and possibly even more than 3 times. The time frame for delivery was way more, and I think we've got an obligation to the voting public of the city to have answers as to why that has happened and who was responsible for those delays and who was responsible for those cost blowouts. Because I can't tell you those answers right now. Every time I speak to people, it's a different answer. It wasn't us, it was them. Oh, that occurred because, or we have no say in it. Now, that's not good enough while we're the custodian on the public purse, and we're going to be looking at 5 point something and possibly 6 billion final compared to a 2 as original price tag. And I say to everyone around this table, we have got an obligation to know that structure that caused to where we are now, and then make some determinations about how this unfolds over the next year or more. Because if this turns even further to custard, we will be hung by the public. And I have to tell you right now, I've spent quite a bit of time in recent days trying to find out, just with regards to Mangawhau, how did it get to be the shambles it is right now, in terms of its layout, the gravel pit and so on, and how did it get to be very unclear as to who determined what we're going to do with it? And the only answers I can get from anybody that are coherent is, oh, well, Barry Potter's going to take control of that and get a solution and solve it. And I wish you well, Barry. But I actually don't think that addresses the problem. The problem is, how did that happen? How did the shambles occur? How did the cost overruns go? And how are we going to get to, I mean, I want to go right back to what was the original proposal to this council and to the government. And then what changes were made along the way, who determined what those changes were, what was the price tag associated with those. I would like to be able to answer every one of those questions, and I couldn't answer one of them if I had sat in an exam. I couldn't answer one of them, and I double dog dare councillors around this table to be able to answer them as well. And I completely disagree with you, Mr. Chair, that that's not something we need to be concerned about. I do think we need answers. I think we need to now know who is the current lead agency. If it's Barry, then does he have control and say over all of the other moving parts if he is uncomfortable with where they're going, or does he bring that, what's the dispute resolution process? What happens if we're not going to put bus stops at a certain point? How does that dispute get resolved? Who's involved in it? This committee or somebody else? Councillor Darby's right. I think a good time frame plan ahead of us about who's doing what and where and what would be vital for us to be on top of this, because we will hang if this turns out to be a disaster. And my last point I'll make in my time frame is this. Can I just go on record as saying I really hope we do a soft launch and not a hard one? Because if we go out, it's going to be on Monday at 6 a.m, it's all on. The disasters that could come back to bite us will be dreadful. But if we start with a couple of the routes, then be 2 or 3 trains trialled for a couple of weeks, learn some feedback, get some lessons, bring a couple more trains on board, and that soft launch occurs over I don't know, I'm not the expert at it, but I'd go a 2 or a 3 month period. So that finally, when it was all running and functioning and full timetables in operation, we'd ironed out all the bugs and we'd ironed out all the gremlins, and we were pretty happy with it, because if we do a hard launch on a particular day at a particular time and it fails, holy hell, I'm going to be on the first plane out of here, because the public will be furious that we spent that sort of money and the headlines are hitting the media about the disaster. So that's my last plea.
Thank you. Chris Fletcher.
Oh, thank you. I think my colleague, Councillor Williamson, has actually just said much of what I was going to say, that I don't think we should be at all defensive about wanting to understand the history to this project. And given that it's the largest infrastructural investment that's ever taken place in Auckland, that there be clear accountability around it. It is, I think we're all probably, if not publicly, but secretly relieved that the most professional director and engineer and council officer that we have in Barry Potter has actually taken charge of this, and I'm hoping his engineering capabilities are going to come to the fore in terms of giving us the comfort of knowing the functionality of this. But it's not wrong to ask questions. When did it become wrong to ask questions, particularly on something that there is so much anticipation for? By asking the questions, we can actually then have the comfort of knowing, yeah, we've dealt with that. We've asked the question about this. You know, one of the councillors referred to the fact everybody's happy with it. Well, I, for one, feel very happy if the Mayor is intervening at this point as the co-sponsor of this project, because I can tell you the Uptown Business Association have been telling me very loudly they are not happy, and I suspect they've been telling the Mayor they are not happy. So it's not, and this should not be seen as a tit for tat. This is simply bringing a sharp focus to accountability and giving the public the comfort of knowing we have asked all the difficult questions and we are comfortable that these have been answered and that we have got accountability for this going forward, because so much money has been poured into this, and people like myself and Councillor Lee and others and Len Brown and all of those who came before us have championed this. And we have an obligation to all of those who have championed it, that we've actually done our best for this project. So I'm completely unapologetic about the fact that questions are being asked at the moment. And I think perhaps Councillor Williamson may or may not agree with me. Maybe it wasn't a good call by the John Key government to actually look at the CRL Limited if it wasn't dealing comprehensively with all of the property and everything that relates to this project. That was a bad call. However, we are where we are. It's good to know what the history is, and it's also good to know what the future might look like. And it won't look good unless we're all doing due diligence on this at this point.
Thank you. Kieran?
Look, I agree with what some of the previous speakers have said. We do have to find the lessons learnt from this in terms of other capital projects that we're going to have going forward with central government, because Aucklanders do need to know that we're going to take some action to address the issues that have occurred, whether that's procurement, decision making, and all the different levels of management where these issues have happened. I am really excited, though, that it is going to open next year, and I'm confident in the leadership that Barry's going to take going forward. And while we can't change the management issues that have happened in the past, we do have a clear way forward now. These delays have had a huge impact on our city, and we know that businesses and many others have really been affected by the delays that have occurred. But what I do just want to finish on saying is that our infrastructure for our city is way behind. You know, we need to look at becoming a global city, and we need to make sure that what we do have left in these last few months of getting this done does get done on time and is actually open by next year. So I fully support any additional levels of oversight that need to happen to make sure we get this across the line, because Aucklanders deserve it, they need it, and we need to get, you know, we need to get more people from overseas coming into the city to build up our economy. So I hope we can get this done by next year at the latest. Kia ora.
Thank you. Richard?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think this process has been a little frustrating for me because I guess it is our problem. 27th of April, 2023, the Mayor and Chris Darby and all of us moved the Mangawhau and Karangahape Road Station precinct designs down to the detail of exactly A, B, C, D, E, and F, and the pocket park, what years they're going to be sold off, what years that they were going to be built on, where the roads were going to be. Unfortunately, we approved all that, and that's why I've been really disappointed about Karangahape Road, because what has come out from that process is completely different to what we approved on the 27th of April 2023. But it sounds like, and great news that it's coming back to where it was. But the Mangawhau precinct issues, because of Kāinga Ora and the direction there and the confusion there, the partners, that has been moved because of the government change. But 2 years ago, we moved from CRLL having complete control over the development to delegating that to Eke Panuku 2 years ago. We did that. So if we all want to change, or we all want to work on a different set of plans and then it needs to come back here. And I guess, Barry, that does need to be assessed, or market opportunities to be looked at. But the issue is we approved it, and then the staff go away and start working on exactly what we told them to do. I mean, it goes all the way to Q. That's how many resolutions there were that we approved, exactly where, exactly what, exactly how much, and the timelines. And some of those development parcels actually don't start till 2030. What the issue is, and I know the Mayor's been hot on, we haven't had or seen a plan of what goes in those spots in a temporary way. We know we can't force developers to build there right now, but what does the station look like? The Mayor and others have said clearly we cannot have windy gravel nothings, which probably will end up just abandoned cars or cars parked on it all day or whatever. So there's clearly got to be a plan in the next 9 months, what it looks like in a temporary, short-term, medium-term, and then if we are going to change the development plan and what has been going out to the development community, we need to do that. That needs to come back to us. But we approved it. Might have been in confidential, but we actually approved the full plan. There was a number of pages. So I guess this is why it frustrates me, is because we all go around blaming everyone apart from ourselves. And so if we could have that back, Barry, if there is an opportunity to get developers on earlier, different makeups, but that, I mean, I wouldn't know how to divide a site up, but we already approved that. And I hope that the team working on Karangahape Road too go back and look at those original plans that actually the community approved last year as well, in my opinion. But that's all I wanted to say, that I'm happy for change, but we have to direct it. Otherwise we get stuck in this vortex of confusion. Thanks.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, at the risk of repeating others, so I'll keep it very brief. I've got 3 points. One, any large project needs to have a lessons learned. And I think we're all saying that that's part of our follow-up, and we will have a lessons learned, because we will do other large projects with central government, whatever colour or flavour that they are. The second point I want to make is the devil is often in the detail. Conceptually, plans get put out, but actually as the plans get developed and refined, the detail becomes important. And I think one of the things that we've seen here is a change from CRLL to Panuku, and then of course we've got CCO reform. So I think that the fact that we've got now one person who we go to that's in charge, I think is a benefit for everybody. And the last thing in response to Councillor Williamson, the Mayor and I met with Sydney Metro, when was it, Mayor? Beginning of the year, I think it was, to actually take through lessons learned that they'd had with their, and you were there, I think, and they did also talk of the fact that you do not go out guns blazing day one, that you do have a soft launch and be very careful how you do that. So they have given us that heads up, and we have been able to learn from others in that. But ultimately I agree with Councillor Leone with their points. This is a great project. This will be good for Auckland, and it's up to us between now and opening to refine the details. Well done, Barry. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. Wayne.
Sure. Just want to follow on from the points that Councillor Fletcher made. There are a number of us here that champion this project under Len Brown. And there are a number of us, and I'm one of them, that consistently ask questions around cost, delivery time, robustness, consistently. So it is of concern as it goes to responsibility, accountability, authority, that we do and are able to ask questions, because ultimately, whether we like it or not, half the buck, probably more than that, rests with us. So I think we should continue to do that. I continue to have concerns around the robustness of the project, particularly as it goes to electricity and power. That's a fragile situation that we have in Auckland and New Zealand. I just want to put that on the table. I haven't raised that now. And I also have concerns around the integrated nature of the CRL. And as Mike Lee would say, look at Wellesley Street in the immediate vicinity of the Aotea station and the mess that is, and it's been going for years now. So I would hope that there's an overall package that we can deliver on so that people can get to stations. I remember once that I participated in a trial, around disability. We had an expert come to us, and I had a blindfold on, and at one point I was also in a wheelchair. And the area that we focused on was around this vicinity. And this was before we started the CRL works, some time ago. And it was really bad then. And I would suggest to you, if any of us undertook something like that today, you would suffer. And that is what people with those sorts of disabilities presently encounter when they come into this space now. And I would hope that those tests will be applied around the CRL and the associated streets and the network and everything that go to it. So again, I'll say it's right and fair for us to be asking questions. That is our role.
Thank you. John Watson.
A quick contribution in the context of institutional memory, not just as it goes to this project, but as it goes to a number of the matters that come before the council. I think it's very important that people do have a good understanding of what precedes or what has amounted in terms of changes or cost blowouts or whatever that accompany projects, but otherwise there's a tendency just to see everything in the here and now. Certainly if I think of the various iterations of the so-called stadium strategy over many years, that's really a guide to what then happens in the present or happens in the future, because if there's no accountability over time with a dispassionate and factual analysis of what has occurred, then you just end up making the same mistakes. It's like snakes and ladders. You're just starting on the same the same square each time, as if nothing has happened in the past that should be a warning or should be a guide to the future. So I certainly welcome that sort of analysis or questioning, and I think in terms of the City Rail Link, I can, my very vivid recollection is the first time the cost was brought up, a very emphatic assurance was given that the cost was going to be 2.4 billion, the council share was going to be 1.2 billion, and quite possibly would be less than that. We all know it's a much anticipated project, and certainly when you go on the tours, it's very impressive what's lying there under the ground waiting to be activated. But in terms of learning from the project, you can't learn unless you visit what's actually happened, and unfortunately in the world today, there's a tendency to just look at the things in the here and the now, and what that means is not a full and accurate awareness for making informed decisions for the future. And so I thank those councillors who pursue their questioning in light of that very stark reality. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, John. And to wrap it up, Mayor Brown. No, hold that, because you want to be last. Chris.
Thanks. There was one champion for this project, and the champion was Len Brown. He probably is still quietly a champion. And I look forward to Len Brown holding the scissors next year, if we still do scissors and tape, and being the person that opens what he championed. He was the only person that put it up there as, this is what I stand for if you elect me as mayor. He was the only one. Others got him behind, and many did around this table. I'm not even going to put my name in that category, because it's not, I don't want to diminish that there was one champion, and he was a canny champion, very, very canny. There was no government that championed it. it was one champion, it was Len Brown for the city. He was optimistic all the way. And what I'm coming to is I feel like we've lost sight of the optimism of this project. We've lost sight of what it delivers. I've heard a lot of questions, and I don't want to invalidate those questions, but I'm not sure what the nub of the questions are. I'm really not sure. I do see a lot of finger pointing at the people that represent Auckland Transport. It's easy. It's so easy to do that because we face inwards at this table. I think we've got to check ourselves on the complaint and the finger pointing. It is good to be curious, to be in the inquiry, asking real questions that are going to deliver more value to this project. I don't think it's okay to be asking questions that don't add value. And many of the questions do not add value, Chair. It's not taking us closer to the gold of an outstanding city rail link. I'm confident and I'm optimistic that that project will open and it'll be stunningly beautiful, impactful, and it'll deliver the outcomes that were beyond what was promised. But let's stay with that optimism. Let's not lose sight of that optimism. This is a big thing for Auckland. Let's start telling Aucklanders how we as politicians are up for that we're following in the footsteps of that champion Len Brown. Because I'm getting a sense that there's a whole lot of aimless niggling and it does not add value. It does not get us closer to the gold. The development plan, as Councillor Hills is very good at finding the dates of things, and I knew it was about that period, but we were all responsible for it. And suddenly, we're pointing the finger at Eke Panuku and Auckland Transport, suggesting it's their problem. It was our creation. Eke Panuku took on the development plan, and my recollection is after they were asked to do so by the City Rail Link Company. Now, we'll find all that out through a memo that Barry and team will put together. But my plea is, about this time next year, that project will be singing to Aucklanders about this time next year. Let's go from now to then, starting to champion it as Len Brown championed it all those years ago. I certainly will.
There you go, you heard the date here first. Shane.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I wasn't going to speak, and I'll just be quick, but I was really, I felt compelled to by Councillor Darby's excellent remarks, and I just wanted to kind of back all that up. I thought it was all great. Look, questions are fine. Look, it is part of our duty as representatives to do that, but I don't know why. It seems like whenever we talk about the CRL on this table, the tone is extremely negative, actually. I have to admit sometimes I struggle to get the thread of what the specific problems that people are driving at are and what the solutions are to those problems. I'm not getting it, right? Maybe the mayor will fill me in on some of that stuff. But look, I agree with Councillor Darby as well in that, look, we need to be looking at this positively as much as we can. This is a city-shaping opportunity. It's billions of dollars of investment. It is the chance for us to work around that from a city planning perspective, to create neighbourhoods around it, to do all sorts of cool stuff that we've been talking about. And we should be celebrating it. We should be positive champions. Some of the niggle I'm not really understanding. So let's celebrate it, guys. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Shane. Kim.
Thank you very much. I wasn't going to say anything because I'm so fresh to this and there's such a long history before I arrived. But there are two ends to this instrument if it's going to sing properly. We've got the terminus here in the CBD, but we've got all the other ends that the people get on to come here or leave when they leave from here. I'm in discussion at the moment in Henderson where we've taken a $40 million cut, a value cut out of that train station. We've shortened the platform by 8 metres. That stopped us getting a causeway overbridge to another side of the rail line where Tātaki and people have spent lots of money developing, etc. I think people have a right to be angry, 5 billion rights to be angry. This is like building a house. We're at the end and we've just got to get it finished, and we give up counting the checks and we just get it finished. And so I'm supportive of getting this thing up and running. I'm supportive of a soft start, but I wanted to say what I just did to make sure that when we come back to this discussion at any point, if I'm here, I can say that I wasn't happy at this point with what's been, with what I've walked into and had to try to grapple with understanding. There's a lot of it moving past this, and they're far from come together yet. And we need to, I agree with Councillor Williamson that we need to get a more focused accountability around this to make sure we come out of the end of it well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. And now to wrap it up, the Mayor.
Okay, thanks for that discussion, everybody. Right when I first arrived here, I always said this was a good project, but it wasn't set up particularly well. And so, and I think it is still a good project. It's way over budget, but that isn't all that surprising in some ways. We have concentrated on getting the actual tunnel finished, which is done. We've concentrated on getting the trains running through, which they are. We've concentrated on getting the signals done, which they are. We've concentrated on finishing the railway stations, which we are. And we have made some decisions in a group. One of the decisions that was made by this council before I arrived was that the land at Mangawhau was sold into the project at a value of $180 million. That was what was put in. We haven't actually sold it yet, but it's put in the budget. So if we don't get $180 million, ratepayers have to cough up the bit. I've also learnt right from the start there that despite the fact that the council is in problem, it was set up to have two sponsors. The person who is the mayor, which in this case is me, and which originally was Len Brown, and he did push it ahead, I'll give him that. And the other person is the Minister of Transport, and there's been two of those since I've been here. And they've had very different views on everything, but nevertheless the money still has to come out of it. And we did, I did fairly new in the piece attend to a meeting here where we approved Iki Panuku, but that was before I really knew a lot about Iki Panuku. I don't think that day that we approved the railway station to be the only one in the country where you couldn't drive to. It was the only one where you had to walk for 250 metres in the rain to get to. I don't think we approved that. I had no idea that the buses weren't going to go there. That would make it a really special and unusual railway station. And so it's only in looking at finding that both myself and the fellow sponsor are pretty worried about the $180 million, and both of us are, and I've got to put it into perspective. Overall, it's a pretty good project. What we're talking about is a Gaza-like piece of land in front of the railway station that you can't drive to, which is just one small part of a very large and ultimately quite successful project. And so, get it into perspective. We're talking about one area there. We're talking about an area which has changed quite a bit to the extent that since we passed that, Kāinga Ora, which was a major player, is now a sunk ship. And when we got to looking into how do we get the money out of this, it was only then that I discovered that we couldn't drive there. You can't get an ambulance there, let alone a taxi, let alone a bus. And so I just looked into that and thought, and it's only in the recent weeks that we have taken over the ownership of the land and the responsibility for getting that money out of it. The government's given it to us. And they have also, in the last week, more or less said the same thing about the Kāinga Ora block, which it does give us advantages. And so when you looked at what the work that had been done, accidentally the work that had been done was minimising the opportunity of getting $180 million back, not maximising it. And it was only looking at how do we get that money, which before my time the council sold into the project for that value. How do we also get, because I want this to work. I want people to catch it. It'll be, and to have to walk in the rain to get off two major roads It just seems amazing to me that the buses don't turn around, go through one and go up and the other way, turn around, go through there and up the other way. There is a completely flat, mostly formed road right through the site now, which we are spending money to make sure you can't drive on. This does not make any sense at all. And so if we all have to come back and have 20 people around here making decisions to come up with that, I'm pretty sure you don't want to say that you were 20 people that decided that you couldn't drive to this railway station. And it was set up to have two sponsors and have the 100% support of the other sponsor to do exactly what we're doing now, just to make sure that we get the maximum value out of the area. And it's just outside one station. So it's not a criticism of the whole project whatsoever. But we have canned Iki Panuku because they weren't as successful as what they thought they would be. And their efforts here were access reducing and value reducing, which is not really what we set out to do. You set out to get $180 million. And I want to get as much of that as we possibly can, and I want to have it so that people get on and off this bloody thing. So I'm a supporter of it. I'm delighted that we've followed through and we've got the tunnel. I'm delighted that there are trains going through there. I'm delighted that bus people are thinking about how we're going to have an integrated system. It's just a very small change just to service one station. Now, if you remember last week, we all changed what happened up at Karangahape Road, and we didn't, and that just changed, and we didn't go to a big meeting around that, and nobody was mounted about that, and that apparently has approved or not disapproved it. But so what we're doing here is maximising the value, and I think that Barry is getting a grip on this and doing a very good job, and I'm happy to support him that we all do something or other that does not result in yet another increase in rates. And if you recall, next year's increase in rates is largely due to the fact that the operating expenses for this thing were not included in anybody's budget. They suddenly became my problem. So I want this to be finished, and I want this to be done well. That was one of my things I stood on. And so I have no compunction about backing myself and Mr. Bishop to push this through and get a very good result for all the people in the uptown business association who rightfully brought it to our attention that it wasn't going to work as well for their people as it should. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so that winds it up in just a couple of minutes. So just to be very, very clear, I'm more than happy for the questions to be asked, but when the answers have been given, I don't see any point in continuing on to ask the same questions. And so that is why I went down the road I did. We are going to get, and so quite obviously, at a project this size, there is going to be a lessons learned process, and that is underway. And so what we will be doing, and I've just been talking to Barry about it, is that we will be having firstly a workshop where we will be able to unpick and look at everything and interrogate what has gone on, but also we will be able to have a discussion as to what the future looks like, and that will then come by way of a report to this committee. So there is a very, very clear and traceable and transparent political accountability, so that we can't have and sit here and try and point the finger at random things that have happened in the past that seem to have changed. We will create a process where we will provide very clear, and there will be nowhere for us to hide. And so that will come. And so I want to thank everyone for, it is a major thing, it's the biggest thing the city has done. And I'm sure whatever time, in whatever month next year, when things are opened, those of us that are back here will be sitting there happily going, what a great thing, because we should. And I can tell you from the people in the south, who probably have challenged themselves probably the most as to what do we get out of the CRL, the people in Franklin. As I sit there and I get off at Papakura where my car is parked, because there's no Drury station yet, but it's coming, and I look at the increasing number of people on that train every day going to and from Puki. And so they actually get it. And as someone has already mentioned, it's more than just, I think it was Ken, this is more than just about the city. This is about how Auckland moves. And so, you know, we seem to get bogged down so often just debating stuff about what's happening here, when actually the greatest benefits will be for the people wanting to move around the city. And I, for one, who uses the train every day, look forward to it. And just hope I'm here that I can get out at the station outside Albert Street. But otherwise, I'll just keep using it. I'll just become pester people. So thank you, everyone. It's been moved and seconded. Those in favour say aye, and against, carried.
Yeah. Can I just ask a question? You and Barry are gonna send out a memo with, you know, some responses and a timeline, etc. There have been things said here in the speeches that are not what we've been told as, you know, information. So I think we need to actually address some of the things that have been said as well. Otherwise, they'll just come up again and again and again. And I'm concerned about that, as you said in your speech, Chair.
So Barry makes intensive notes, as does Mara, and so there will be follow-up. They note down what is said, and we have a debrief after every meeting, and so yes. Okay, so next item is the rail upgrade, and so Dave Gordon